I'm Scarlett, a 29-year-old business owner. When I was born, my mother gave me this name. She claimed it was because I had a head full of red curls, so she thought the meaning embodied bravery and courage. But in reality, growing up it was more like having been marked with the scarlet letter of shame, for me. All during elementary school, I had healthy bonds and friendships, some that carried till this day. In middle school though, was where the awkwardness began. My life took a sharp downward spiral into the abyss of graceless puberty, that later translated to lost friendships and unmerciful bullying. Mostly from the very friends I had bonded with earlier. This period of my life was most unkind to me. I had crazy haphazard hair, painful braces and ugly pimples that would randomly spring up on my plump face at the most awkward and inopportune times. It was torture. I was tortured because of it. But through it all, my mother would continue to tell me how beautiful I was. Although we both knew that was a lie. But it was in high school when I truly entered into the hallways of hell. Where puberty for me was like a devil getting her horns, but my best friend Penelope, who we affectionately called Penny, went through her period like an angel getting her wings. Where I was plump and overweight, she was thin and lean. My mouth was like a cavern of jagged rocks with crooked and protruding teeth. Penny's teeth were like the pearly white gates of heaven. I guess you know where I'm going here. But my mother, being the eternal optimist, would say to me, "It's not what's on the outside, but what's on the inside that counts." At that time, she may as well have been speaking to me in Greek. Those words were of no consolation to me. They were empty and meaningless words only a caring and loving mother would say to an ugly child. Yet, internally keeping my mother's words in my heart, I never let my discomfort and insecurities affect my relationship with Penny. She was still my best friend, or so I thought. Over time, the more popular she was, the more mean she became, to me. She had been the one person on the planet, besides my mother, who I thought I could share my deepest thoughts with. Only to have her use my own words against me to shame and humiliate me in public. "Hey, lard ass. Don't sit at this table. Go over there. Your pimples are gross and I don't want to see them. You're going to make me lose my appetite," Penny said cruelly one day. The entire cafeteria erupted in laughter. Just like that, it was set. I was officially the outcast of the school. One minute Penny was showing me how to put on makeup and how to wear my clothes so my figure won't look so unflattering, to pointing out all of the flaws I wanted so desperately to conceal. While Penny was beginning to blossom like a rare winter rose, I was retracting into my cocoon of unhappiness and loneliness. Penny's confidence began to spring forth, mine all but withered and died. By graduation, although I had shed all of the unwanted weight, and my skin was as smooth and clear as porcelain and my teeth had been corrected with the god-awful painful braces my mother forced me to wear, I still saw the pitiful plump girl from my youth. But at this point, I had become a recluse who occupied herself with studying and focusing on my new path to college and away from this hellhole of a town. So as we neared our graduation, I managed to be ranked second in the entire school, whereas Penny, who had depended on her looks only, was limping to the finish line at the bottom of the class. Yet somehow she took a twisted pride in being considered dumb and clueless. It was like a badge of honor for her. The more she accomplished without studying, the more it solidified how her beauty carried her through, yet again. So all throughout my high school days, when Penny and her minions would run across me in the hallway, she'd smack my books out of my arms and onto the floor and glare at me. "That's right, you'd better use your brain. We all know your looks aren't going to get you very far in life. People like you have to be smart. It's people like myself who are lucky enough to have the looks to carry them through." This is when I met my now husband, Shadow. He was a fellow nerd. Although he hid it well. He was quite the opposite of me. He was handsome and popular and came from a well-to-do family. So no one dared tease him about being smart. It was expected, since he would one day inherit his family's business. He would kneel down and pick up my scattered books and carry them for me to my next class. His idle chit-chat was a comfort. He was brilliant when it came to ignoring the gawking stares of the other students as he escorted me to class. His nonchalant persona was a shield for me. Soon, I began picking up his air of indifference until I truly didn't care what anyone thought of me anymore. In just a matter of months, I would be free and hopefully never have to see any of their ugly faces again. But the college life I envisioned to be a liberating experience for me, turned into a continuation of the hell that had been following me since middle school. Shadow and I had discussed our dream university, and coincidentally, ended up getting accepted into the same university under the same business program. During this time, it solidified our budding relationship even more. Before we began dating, I was now the envy of all of the girls who knew he was a good catch, as they put it. He was tall, athletic, smart, handsome, rich. This list was endless. Not to mention he was kind, gentle, considerate and a truly loving person. On occasions, he could also be pretty goofy and funny. This was a side to him he only reserved for the people closest to him. Otherwise, in public he was generally very stoic and reserved. I felt honored to know this side to him. But then the gates of hell broke loose, again. The voice I thought I would never hear again called for me from across the campus. "Scarlett. Is that you?" What a coinkydink. It was Penny. I literally broke out into a cold sweat. Her words were dripped in sarcasm and laced with malice. "I heard you were going here." Usually this is where Shadow would step in and shield me. But at the moment, I was alone. At the time, I didn't realize this was the beginning of a life lesson that would carry me into my future. Slowly, I could feel myself becoming stronger and more determined. In what should have been a liberating experience, I had to deal with several more torturous years of Penny's petty jealousies and antagonizing behavior. In one of the most torturous times in my life, I was simultaneously dealing with one of the most wonderful times in my life. Shadow and I had gotten engaged during our sophomore year of uni. Neither of us were big on the idea of holding a lavish wedding, even though both of our families objected profusely. But in the end, we won that battle and a small, intimate wedding ceremony was held immediately following our graduation. Without break, Shadow began to work at his father's company while I explored the possibilities of starting up my own company. But after several months and careful discussion, Shadow convinced me to work for his father as an intern, to gain the knowledge and experience I would need before I ventured out on my own. Because Shadow and I were going to be working at the same company, we didn't want to reveal that we had already gotten married. As a family, we decided it would be best to conceal this fact because they thought it would be too distracting and we didn't want it to appear that I was hired due to some sort of nepotism, even if I were just a lowly intern doing all of the grunt work. People didn't even know we knew each other, that's how discreet we were being. The first 2 years was great. Though most of the work was grueling and what I deemed insignificant at the time. What does setting up the coffee and making copies for the staff have to do with me wanting to learn about business? I often asked myself. But over time, when I had to resolve one issue after another, no matter how mundane it seemed in the grand scheme of things, it became clear. You would never be able to run a successful business without knowing the ins and outs, even on the most minuscule level. Slowly, I began to be given more tasks as my experience grew. Shadow would tell me each night how proud he was of me for my genuine willingness to learn without complaint. Even his father praised my work ethics. My confidence was growing and I was truly beginning to be proud of myself. In just a short time, it was announced that I would be leading a new project for a sister company that had recently been launched. It was the company I had been developing and spearheading since graduation. Shadow's father was fronting the capital and I was the soon-to-be announced CEO. It was agreed that, during the company's 50th year anniversary, all of the appropriate and relevant announcements will be made then. Not only the launch of the new company where I will be the CEO, but mine and Shadow's marriage. Which we were already approaching our 3-year wedding anniversary. But as usual, like clockwork, the abyss of hell yawned and opened up. Even though Penny learned that her looks were not going to get her anywhere once she got to university, it still didn't improve on her character much. If anything, she became a more vile person because of it. It took her an additional 2 years before she graduated. I had almost forgotten all about her, until... Once I got to the office, the new interns were being introduced. It was Penny. My hands began to sweat. It was an involuntary reaction to seeing her again. Or was it the cold, evil smirk she gave me when she recognized me? It was at this time when the department heads chose from the pool of applicants the intern which appropriately suited the needs of their office. Unfortunately for me, Penny was left to me. I remember feeling defeated. But I did everything in my power not to react in a negative way. Although I inwardly groaned. Surprisingly, the first couple of weeks was pretty pleasant. Slowly I began to let my guard down a little. Maybe she's learned her lesson and is finally growing up, I remember telling my husband one night. But he was so busy with his own work, he just looked up from his paperwork and nodded and graced me with one of his alluring smiles. Well, we all have to grow up. Maybe she learned a lot in uni and is taking things more serious, he agreed, admittedly in a half-hearted way. I knew he wasn't really listening to me, but I still felt his armor of protection. Simply because he was here. But after the third week, Penny's true colors began to show itself again. Penny, can you please make a few copies for me? This meeting is really important, so we have to be extra careful not to have any mistakes, I said. Sure, no mistakes. Got it. Penny took the papers from me and left my office. I was so used to seeing that devilish smirk on her face, I ignored it. I was thinking it was just her normal expression after all these years. But I was wrong. The meeting was a disaster. All of the tasks Penny was responsible for went off without a hitch. The coffee was amazing. The presentation was flawless. Everything was perfect, except my flow chart was jumbled, out of order and confusing. The sound of papers rustling while people flipped through the pages, trying to keep up, was distracting and annoying. Some people just gave up and slammed the papers down on the desk. They were not hiding their irritation. With each meeting, Penny did something more to further sabotage my meetings. Some of the staff confided that they knew she was behind it and others just scrambled to correct it in order to mitigate some of the damage it was sure to cause. Either way, it was becoming too frustrating to ignore. I called Penny into my office. Maybe I was hoping I could appeal to her, for old time's sake, and she would remember when we used to be friends. But there was no hope in that. Penny, why do you find it necessary to continue with this petty rivalry? Your behavior is uncalled for. Our workplace is no place for this imaginary competition. It only exists in your own head, I started as soon as she sat down. But what she said chilled me to the bone. I always knew she didn't like me, but this was the first time I ever heard her say it, and why? Don't worry. I'm not going to stop until I make you look so bad you'll be chased out. You don't deserve to be promoted. That job will be mine. I will run this program, not you. The usual smirk she had began to look more sinister. It was turning into a feral sneer. It was frightening. That's not happening. I tried to keep my tone calm. For the first time it wasn't fear that cracked my voice, but anger. If you can't grasp this fact, I will advise you to begin looking elsewhere for employment. Yeah, that won't happen. Penny laughed. You think you can use this job to get close to Shadow, but I won't let that happen. What? My mouth genuinely opened from the shock of her words. Penny went on, I know you always put on your pitiful face to grab his attention. But I'm going to show him how incompetent you really are. Then he'll stop feeling sorry for you and forget all about your pathetic act. Why is it that wherever he is, so are you? Do you think he's going to fall for that ugly face of yours? Humph. Dream on. Beautiful people are attracted to other beautiful people. Like I said before, only ugly people need to be smart. You need to just learn your job, do it well and keep making us lots of money. When I'm the wife of the soon-to-be CEO, I may even throw you a bone and allow you to keep your stupid job. So don't think of yourself higher than you are. Stay in your place. With those cutting words, Penny stormed out of my office. Soon after, the staff began complaining how Penny was shirking her duties and piling all of her work and responsibilities on them. They said, and I quote, she's running around here acting like she's the new CEO's wife. One night, when I had a particularly rough day dealing with Penny and her crap, my husband did something that I couldn't believe. But thinking back now, it was something that shaped me to this day. I complained and whined until he was fed up. Usually he's quite understanding, but today he was fed up. He put his paper down that he had been studying intently and walked over to me. His firm hands took me by the shoulders and he stared intently into my eyes. They were warm, caring and loving, but stern. Something inside me wanted to melt into his embrace by his mere touch. I just wanted him to pull me to him, stroke my hair and tell me it will be all right and that I was strong and smart and that I would get through it. Instead, it was like he dashed a bucket of cold water over my head. He, not so gingerly, pushed my shoulders back, put his finger under my chin and forcibly lifted my head up and stared at me for a long time. Who are you? Where is that strong, confident woman I married? You cannot take her place. You're not welcome in our lives. Get lost, he said sternly. His austere declaration was so shockingly abrupt, I couldn't do anything but blink back a few of the tears that wanted to fall down my cheeks. But he shook me again. Where is my wife? Give her back. I'm not going to lie, I was stunned. The 50th year anniversary was rapidly approaching and I was losing all confidence in our love for each other. And my ability to successfully launch the idea I had been hatching since high school. It seemed, suddenly that ugly, chunky, pimple-faced girl was back. I didn't know if I had what I needed to defeat her. I wasn't even sure if I had the strength to try. But my wonderful husband gifted me the most beautiful dress and jewelry for this special event. I looked like a fairy princess who was going to meet her prince at the ball. Even I, no matter how insecure I could be at times, had to admit the woman looking back at me through the mirror was stunning. Shadow stood behind me and gave me a loving embrace. I could see in his eyes he was pleased with the reflection of me staring back at him. He said, "You have me standing by your side. I know you have ghosts of the past, but it's up to you to dispel them from your life. I can't do it for you. I support you in whatever you want to do. I know you can't see it, but you're a beautiful person, inside and out. Don't ever let anyone make you doubt yourself. I won't stand for it." The anniversary gala was definitely an opulent event. Everyone was dressed to the nines and looking as radiant and as beautiful as ever. Even Penny was her usual, gorgeous self. You could tell she chose with the idea of attracting as much attention on herself as possible. She knew all eyes would be on her except the one she wanted the most. His eyes were on me. She really was walking around as though she expected to be announced the new CEO's wife or something. She was arrogant, pompous and acted really evil to the waitstaff. She bit on something from one of the trays and promptly spit it out, back onto the tray. Her attitude was appalling. But I held my tongue. Hopefully, when this event was over, I would never have to see her horrible face and deal with her hideous attitude, ever again. Tonight, I was going to get rid of the most debilitating ghost of my past. Penny. When the crowd began to hush from their quiet chatter, Shadow's dad began to speak. Everyone was in rapt anticipation of the changes that were going to be made. It was all very hush-hush to this point. So all eyes and ears were peeled on him, the sole spotlight in the entire hall. As expected, he handed over the torch of CEO to his beloved and capable son, Shadow. The round of applause was nearly deafening. A few whistles pierced and echoed around the room. I looked over at Penny. She had a broad smile on her face. For the first time, she looked almost human. Her expression was pleasant and warm. In that brief instant, she made me miss the old friend she used to be. Which was quickly dashed when she caught me staring at her and that diabolical, evil contempt overtook her again. My attention went back to my husband. He was about to make some important revelations of his own. My heart began to pound loudly in my chest. As your new CEO, I have a few announcements I'd like to make. And before you all jump on me for keeping some things close to my vest, I'd like to confess something. I'm married. Happily. This made me look to Penny for some odd reason. Her face fell. Her mouth fell open. He went on to say, "She's beautiful, kind and smart. She was instrumental in launching the new sister company and will be the new CEO. I hope you can give her your full cooperation in making it a success. The entire room looked around collectively, trying to find out who he could be talking about. No one even looked in my direction. That brought a smile to me. I was the least person they would suspect. I wasn't drop-dead gorgeous befitting the handsome, heir apparent. At most, conventionally, I was just a former ugly duckling that was now kinda cute in her own quirky way. Shadow extended his hand out and called, "Honey." The room was uncomfortably silent, there were a few mumbles and whispers. By the time I reached the stage and met my husband in the lone spotlight, the eruption, cheers and applause began to engulf the room. A few, "You go girl," echoed over the thunderous claps. Shadow hugged me warmly and gave me a breath-stealing kiss. This made the cheers ear-splitting. When we finally made it home that night, we were intoxicated on our joy and happiness. Our union was well received and some admitted they suspected it all along. Either way, we were happy with the turn of events. Even Penny didn't have the power to spoil the gleeful spirit I was enjoying. After the announcement that Shadow and I had been married for nearly 3 years, you could hear the commotion Penny caused as she made a ruckus while leaving the venue. Knocking over trays, pushing waiters, stepping on toes. Anything that garnered a reaction, she did. Still, when she texted me later that night, I was in no way bothered in the least. Penny texted, "Consider this my formal letter of resignation. Forgive me if I don't congratulate you or bid you happiness." "Sorry, not sorry." I responded to her text. Resignation received and accepted. Bye. My mother's words came back to me. I finally understand Greek, the thought made me giggle to myself. "What's so funny?" Shadow asked. I was just thinking to myself, I finally understand Greek. I explained what my mother said to me years ago about being beautiful on the inside was more important than being beautiful on the outside. Held me and kissed the top of my head. I agree. Although you must know your outside beauty has long caught up to your inside beauty. Thank you. You make me feel so special. But still, I'm just worried that one day Penny's outside beauty will catch up to her inside black heart. Then where will she be? Later we heard through college friends that Penny's luck finally ran out with using her beauty as a scheme to climb the corporate ladder. It was discovered she was having an affair with one of her bosses at work. When his wife found out, she reported it to the company and he was promptly demoted. And Penny eventually quit since he had nothing left to offer once his salary was nearly cut in half and his position yielded little to no power. I'm sure she's now trolling for her next victim. But Shadow and I are still going strong and are as happy as ever. We recently welcomed our beautiful baby girl. She has a head full of red, crazy curls just like her mommy. But thankfully she has beauty and charisma just like her daddy.
Thank you for listening to my story. Come back for more stories and help us grow our channel. Bye.